greater joy, you could say, to a new family than the birth of a newborn. The parents marvel at the gift of a newborn baby. It's always exciting, and the anticipation and the joy that as you watch your baby grow, or whether it's a grandchild or whatever, and the anticipation of seeing them, hit the different milestones of growth, when they finally start sleeping through the night, finally, or at least through much of the night anyway. Of course, the day will come when they don't want to sleep at all during the night and they sleep all day and all kinds of things. But, when they start sleeping through the night, and then when they first sit up, that's a big milestone, or when you start crawling, or, when they start taking those first baby steps, how exciting, to see the baby grow. And if a baby wasn't growing, or achieving any of those things, a parent would be concerned, and rightly so. Well, I think in much the same way that a parent would be rightly concerned if their baby's not growing and achieving these different things, I think in many respects the Lord would be rightly concerned, as He wants us to grow, that if we're not growing in our faith, if we're not growing spiritually, that there's something wrong. There's a reason to be concerned. God wants us to grow. And so this morning I wanted to look at 9 ways, and they're on the sheet there, some message notes, of how we can be a better dad or a granddad, in order to help our kids and others grow in the way God wants us to grow and God intends for us to grow. So, and this applies not only for dads too. A lot of these things apply to moms, of course, too, and it applies really to anybody that deals with kids. So it's not just speaking to the dads in here. All right, first one I got on here is this: raise them in the instruction, in the discipline of the Lord. Like it says, Ephesians 6:4, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, rather, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. So Paul here is teaching us, God is teaching us that we're not to provoke, we're not to, don't stir up, don't incite, don't cause your kids to get angry. They can do that on their own easy enough, but don't you provoke them and there's all kinds of ways we can do that. Often if the dad gets, if he gets angry and he blows up, or, some harsh reaction to something is, a couple of ways we can provoke or stir up anger in our kids. Again, there can be many ways. But rather, we're to bring them up in the discipline and instruction of God. Well, how do we do that? Well, it's not that, we think about it, it's not that difficult. Really, the first thing is set the example. Set the example. For example, take them to church. Encourage them to go to church. I remember hearing we had one couple who, not here, at a different church, who would bring their, every Sunday morning, they'd bring their kids to church, drop them off, and then the adults, they went off and they played tennis during church. And when church was done, they came back, picked up their kids, and went home. And it's like, okay, what's that teaching the kids? That church is important and you got to be there? No, not at all. It's teaching them, hey, when you get older, you get to skip church and go play tennis too, just like us. We need to set the example. They really are watching us. That's why it's, Proverbs 22:6, another verse that was on that video, where it says, train up a child in the way that he should go, and then even when he's old, he will not depart from it. Well, that's not, while that's not an ironclad guarantee, I wish it were, but kids still have a free will. And we all can think of kids who were brought up by amazing parents and still under certain pressure or certain whatever made a bad decision or went off a certain way. But still, it is in Proverbs 22, it's a general observation, a wise observation about the way life generally works. And so that gives us great hope. We're to train up our child in the way they should go. So we have that great promise. That's why, again, pray for them, and pray with them. The best chance you have, the people who have the best chance of having a developing praying kids will be praying parents, setting the example. They need to see that. And then, because when they get older, they will tend to do as you do. Maybe not as you say, but as you do, as they see what you do. Sometimes you hear funny things, some gal who gets in her late 20s or something, or 30s, and all of a sudden it dawns on her, and she, I'm acting just like my mother, and I said I would never do that, and well, it tends to happen. We've watched their example, and that gets ingrained in us. So setting the example, so it comes back, like it says, train them, bring them up, teach them. Fathers, this is something, to me, fathers think teaching is something others can do, or we bring them somewhere and let others do it. But a father who teaches his kids the difference between right and wrong. I always loved that football coach when we were on Campus Crusade and out in the University of Millersville, and the football coach, and I was talking with him, and he said, he brings his kids to church. He says, but I work very hard. I want my kids to know the difference between right and wrong. And I thought, good for you. And especially nowadays, people are clueless about what's right or wrong. And they don't know where to find what's right and what's wrong. Oh, we find it right here. It's in God's Word. Everything else is shifting sand and changes with the whims of people. But this doesn't change. Right from wrong. And the parent, the father who will teach his kids right from wrong and encourage them to do their best will really end up usually having a kid who will make some wise decisions in life. One boy had a interesting father. There's a story. He had a bad temper. The boy did. So his father gave him a bag of nails and told him, every time you lose your temper, you got to take one of these nails. You got to hammer it into the fence out back. Well, he said the very first week, the boy had driven in 37 nails into that fence. It gradually dwindled down as he discovered it was easier to hold his temper than to keep driving those nails into that fence. So when finally the day came, he says, when the boy didn't lose his temper, his father suggested, okay, now pull out one nail for every day that you didn't lose your temper that day. Well, it would take some time if he did 37 in just 1 week, but he continued, he did that. And he says, keep doing that until all the nails are out of that fence. When that finally happened, the father said to him, look, you've done well, my son, but look at all the holes in that fence. That fence will never be the same. When you say things in anger, they leave a scar just like these. He says, a verbal wound is as bad as a physical one. So again, the importance of teaching our kids what's right, what's wrong, setting the example, just can't be overplayed. All right, second one on here, honor your children's mother. Obviously one of the best things you can do for your kids, we've all heard this, and these are just common sense things on here, is to show respect to the mother of the kids, to your wife, their mother. They need to see that. That means working on your marriage. Letting your kids see that you love their mother. A father and mother who will respect each other help provide a very secure environment for that child to grow up in. They, again, need to see that. In fact, James Dobson wrote something about that on family instability a while back. He said, family instability affects everyone, but especially the kids. The most vulnerable victims of family instability are the kids who are too young to understand what has happened to their parents. He said that tragic impact on the next generation was graphically illustrated to me in a recent conversation I had with a 6th grade teacher in an upper middle class California city. Complete a sentence that began with the words, I wish. So all they had to do is started with, I wish. Does the sound go out? Is that better? Okay. The battery operated things, you never know when the battery's going to go. So we'll take that off. But anyway, she has this creative writing task. Just say, I wish, and they could answer it. She thought, she says, I expect the boys and girls to say, express wishes for bicycles. I wish I had a dog. I wish I had a new TV set. I wish I had a trip to Hawaii. Those kinds of things. Instead, 20 out of the 30, so 2/3 of them, 20 of the 30 kids made reference in their responses to their own disintegrating families. And these weren't poor families. A few of their actual sentences were as follows. I wish my parents wouldn't fight, and I wish my father would come back. I wish my mother didn't have a boyfriend. I wish I could get, they're all sad, but I wish I could get straight A's so my father would love me. That's a horrible one. Very, very, very few people get and should get straight A's. That's the cream of the crop. That's the upper, 1%. That's not average, unless the grading system is all messed up. The A's are for people who are doing perfectly, but most of us are just average. But to think you must be perfect, for your parent to love you, how sad. I wish I had one mom and one dad, so the kids wouldn't make fun of me. I have 3 moms and I have 3 dads, and they really botch up my life. Wow, so family instability is a huge one today. That's why it's so important to work on your marriage and to honor your children's mother. They need that foundation. Or I think of sometimes what's helpful to look at what's the opposite of honoring your mother. And I thought, what an illustration we had even this past week in that horrible mass shooting in Orlando. And the guy, his last name was Mateen, who came out and whether he really was part of them or not, we don't know, of radical Islam and ISIS. But his wife would say last times he would come home and just beat her for no reason. Just come in the door and just start beating her. Well, that's exactly that's the opposite of what I'm trying to talk about here. That's showing no respect for the mother of your kids. That's horrible. All right, so rather honor your children's mother. Third, earn the right to be heard. Too often it seems like I hear stories of fathers who only talk to their kids when their kids have messed up somehow. Or their talk is always so negative. When they sit somewhere and they go, why don't you cut your hair? Why don't you do this? You need to change your looks. You need to train, you're not dressing right. It was just negative. And man, who wants to listen to that? If your best friend always did that to you, they certainly wouldn't be your friend very long at all. You'd want to stay away from them. And yet too many fathers fall into that kind of role, critical, or only when they mess up. And how important it is to start talking with your kids early, or grandkids, whatever, early about all kinds of things, even difficult subjects, so that when throughout their years and teen years, they're just used to talking about all those kinds of things. At least there's a better chance they might talk about some of those things with you, rather than thinking, oh, Dad wants to talk. What'd I do wrong now? So again, earning the right to be heard. And this is where I think, too, sharing a meal together can be so important. Too many families don't, but to at least one meal a day, to try to have it together. That gives some structure to the day. It gives you an opportunity where the family's together at least one time and where things perhaps can be discussed. All right. Earning the right to be heard. 4, spend time with them. Again, how a father spends his time says a lot to the kids. And if he never spends time with his kids or grandkids, that's saying a lot, saying that all these other things are more important to you than me. And even if, and they'll feel neglected, that really they're not all that important to you. No matter how many words you try to use to try to describe, that's not the case, it's not true. Well, no, they'll look at what you're doing. Treasuring kids means making sacrifices. You simply won't be able to do everything you want to do. That's why it's so important that we take our God-given responsibility. One of the purposes of a marriage is to raise up, if they have that opportunity to raise up a godly heritage. Not just a heritage, a godly heritage. And we need to take that responsibility and that opportunity very seriously. Because again, notice, that verse in Ephesians 6:4, it's addressed to fathers. Fathers, bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Doesn't mean mothers can't. They They have, they do, they will, but it seems like they're going to do it anyway. It's the fathers that usually need to be reminded to do this, that their final responsibility will lie with them. That's where I am very thankful for my father. He a very hard-working man. Most of his life, during the years when I was growing up, ran a hardware store, Coast to Coast hardware store. So all us kids, we all worked there. Had no choice. We all worked there, and but we learned a lot there. But he was very busy. Running a store, a retail operation, takes everything you got if you want to have a successful operation. And he was always very busy. But one of the things he always did, and I think I've mentioned this before, he always insisted that we have a family vacation every summer. And so we look forward to that time. Well, yeah, he'd be busy, other times, but we knew we had that time, and we would, for usually a couple weeks at a time, we'd take off. We traveled all over the United States. Alaska, other places, tremendous trips. And I appreciate that very much, because he could have said, I don't have time for this. But he took the time for that. And all us kids are very appreciative and remember those times very fondly. Spending time with them is the point there. Fifth one, disciplining with love. All children need guidance. All children need loving correction. They may not want it, but they need it. We know that. And if you won't guide them, if you won't teach them, the government will. The government will teach them the government's agenda for their life and the government's view of morality. That's why I always feel so sorry for those kids when they sometimes their parents will say, well, we don't want to influence them anyway. We want them to make up their own minds. And I thought, the government doesn't share that idea. The government has very firm things that it's going to teach your kids, and morality and everything. And if that's well, I won't go on with that. We could talk more on that. Hopefully you want more for your kids than that, and a much higher morality and a more ethical morality. But anyway, that's where, again, kids need reasonable boundaries based on their age, based on their temperament, and what they've earned. That's where it's so important to be a student of your child or your grandchild. Are you students of them? Everyone's different. They can't all be treated the same. We know that. But that's a good thing that they're different. That's exciting. And to remind your children of the consequences of their actions and carry through, and to reward them for good behavior as well. This is where, again, that final part of Ephesians 6:4 plays, bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Not provoking your children to anger through unjust boundaries or by you being out of control. But fathers who discipline in a calm way, in a fair way, show love for their kids. And sometimes people will ask, well, how can discipline be a loving thing? Easy. Would it be loving for you to let your kid go play wherever he wants, say on the freeways? Oh, of course not. You have to set boundaries. The loving thing is tell them stay off the freeway. And there's all kinds of situations like that in life. We have to set those boundaries. That's the loving thing to do. One guy taught his kid about boundaries this way. His name is Randy Garn. He's a Utah businessman. He remembered how when he was 16 years old, he asked his dad to borrow the car. So it was Friday night. His dad said, fine, you just got to be home by 11. So be home by 11, everything will be fine, but if you're not home by 11 and you just blow off what I say here, and you come back later in that, well, the prom is probably out. So okay, sure, fine, I'll be back by 11. Well, he didn't get home till well after 1 a.m. And so he tries to sneak in, goes up to his bedroom, thinking that he got in. He turns on the light, and there's his dad sitting in his room. And his dad just tells him, I'm not mad, but I want you to know the prom is now out. And I love you, but unlike what you did tonight, I always keep my word. And so it's a tough lesson for him to learn, but he learned it. Again, setting boundaries, and that's where it's important for us to be students of our kids for what works and for them. Another one, let's go on. 6, be a role model. Again, this is so important. This is common sense, but we just can't emphasize it enough. Fathers need to set the example for their kids. And we are role models for them and grandkids, whether we realize it or not. We still are. You know, a girl who grows up with a loving father will learn that she is, worthy of being treated with respect by boys. And she'll learn what to look for in a future husband. And fathers need to treat and teach their boys things like hard work and being honest and treating girls with respect, some of those things. Again, speaking about being a role model, this guy said his father taught him about time management. He says, I still remember him telling me, hey, if you want to go fishing tomorrow, be on the dock at 2 p.m. sharp. He said, there I was, about 2:05, waving goodbye to my dad who was driving off to go fishing, missing his fishing buddy. He said, well, it's pretty tough love, but I learned the lesson. When he says 2 p.m. sharp, he means 2 p.m. sharp. And this guy went on to be a successful businessman. But things like that. Again, being a role model. How important that is. I remember coming across this. I thought very interesting, this poem. It applies to all dads. It says, there are little eyes upon you, and they're watching night and day. There are little ears that quickly take in every word you say. There are little hands all eager to do everything you do, and a little boy who's dreaming of the day he'll be like you. You're the little fellow's idol. You're the wisest of the wise. In his little mind about you no suspicions ever rise. He believes in you devoutly, holds that all you say and do, he will say and do in your way when he's grown up like you. There's a wide-eyed little fellow who believes you're always right, and his ears are always open, and he watches day and night. You are setting an example every day in all you do for the little boy who's waiting to grow up to be just like you. Isn't that something? We really are role models. Whether we want to be or not, whether we realize it or not, we are. That's a great responsibility. Well, another, not only being a role model, but to read to your kids. I think dads have to make a special effort to read to their kids in a world now where TV dominates and where video games dominate. When your kids are young, take the time to read to them. And when they get older, to encourage them to read. I think it's true. I think if you instill a love for reading in your kids, you are ensuring for them a lifetime of personal growth and a lifetime of career growth. It doesn't mean they have to sit down and love to read novels or something, but just to read, whether it be trade magazines for their job, whether it be, whatever. I mean, a key to success, one key to success, in life or in any endeavor is to be a good reader. Dads can encourage that. I've always liked the statement that said, all leaders are readers. Not all readers are leaders, but all leaders are readers. Otherwise, you'll never stay current and up with all that's happening even in your profession. So, readers. One of the things I did, and I've mentioned this, I'll just mention it here, to encourage our kids to read, was, especially once they got to be teens, is that I remember I came across one book written by Josh McDowell. It was written for teens, and had all kinds of chapters on issues teens go through. How to handle dating, how to treat dealing with sexual issues, all these variety of subjects. And I remember looking at that and reading parts of it, and I thought, this is fantastic information. My kids need to get this info. And so in order to get that info in them, I said, tell you what, and our oldest first, and then when the next got old enough to read it, then them, and so all three kids. I said, if you read this book, I'll pay you $10. And then you got to prove to me you read it, but it won't be hard. But if you read this, $10. And so each one did. And even though it cost me, and then there were a couple other books I had them read too. I thought, man, this is getting incredible information into their brains. And it was totally worth it to me. Of course, later Dan comes up and tells Deb, says, well, when he wanted me to read it, I would have read it for free. But if he wants to pay me $10, fine. And I thought, really? Now you tell me? I could have saved myself some money, but anyway, it's still worth it. All right. 8, show affection. Children really need the security that comes from knowing that they are loved, that they are wanted, that they are accepted in the family. And parents, and especially fathers, need to become comfortable. Some are not comfortable, but they need to get over that. And to being willing to show love to their kids, whether it be, through their words, through a hug, through, with boys, they like to wrestle, and, or, if they're young enough, you can tussle their hair or something, or I guess all kinds of different ways you can, some kind of loving touch as well to express that. Showing affection to your kids will not make them sissies. Rather, it grounds them in being valued and being loved in the family. They need that. After all, what's the mark of a Christian? What did Jesus say in John 13:35? By this, what? By this all people will know that you are my disciples, by your love for one another. Well, that includes the family members. Some guys are good at showing appreciation to other people at work or even people at church, but they forget their own family members. No, it especially starts there. All right. Do you want to be known as a loving man or as an unloving man? You see a lot of these grave sites, and a lot of them all say, here lies Bob, a loving father, loving husband. And I thought, really? Every single one here is a loving father? I hope so. They've never put on there, here lies Bob, an unloving husband, But what do you want to be known as? And we need, do your families know you as that? I'm always amazed, and sometimes they ask kids, and they go, do your parents love you? And they go, I don't know. I really don't know. I don't think so. They're always mad at me or something, and you tell the parents that, and they go, what? Of course we love them. We love them more than anybody. Well, somehow you're not communicating that because the kids aren't getting it. Well, of course they should get it. I told them, well, no, they're still not getting it. And you need to figure out ways to make sure that they get that message. One talking about love in action we've seen just recently was what happened again after those Orlando shootings. Remember, maybe you heard how, Chick-fil-A restaurants, have a Christian owner, so they've never been open Sundays. And how they make enough on 6 days a week, so they don't have, God blesses them, and so they're not open 7 days a week. They're always closed Sunday, so their employees can have a day of rest, a day off. And but right after that shootings in Orlando, the Chick-fil-A in Orlando that was nearby opened up their store on Sunday, first time, and they made free meals, not just for the public, but for all. There were so many workers and volunteers who were helping with that setting and giving blood and all kinds of things that they gave all those workers free meals. And the owner of Chick-fil-A, he's been under pressure, although, because he said he's not in favor of gay marriage, so he gets a lot of pressure for that, even though when people actually meet the guy, they go, he's the most loving guy you can ever imagine. But yet, what a tremendous example of love in action. Tremendous. Way to go, Chick-fil-A. Oh, one more. Maybe need to quit. Realize the father's job is never done. Even when your kids grow up and they leave home, your job's never done, is it? If you've done your job well, they'll still keep coming to you for wisdom, for advice, for, whatever. For whatever, lots of things. But being a parent, again, is just never over. Of course, your relationships with them changes over the years. That's good. It should. You can't treat them, when they're 20 the same way when they were 12. But you'll always be a parent. I like to compare it in a way to 1 Corinthians 9:24. Paul says, I don't run aimlessly. I don't box as one beating the air, but I discipline my body and keep it under control. Wow. Lest after preaching to others, I myself should be disqualified.
And then earlier he says, do you not know that in a race all the runners compete, but only one receives the prize, so run that you may obtain it. I think in many ways, the parenting and fathering is like a race. And the word here, run, means run. But it has the idea of running with consistency and constancy. You're in a race. You keep going. And it requires all of your energy, and it requires that race all of your attention. You're focused on the goal. And parenting is a lot like that. It needs to be consistent. You can't be a parent one week and I'm going to take a week off, and then, no. It needs consistency, constancy to run that race. And to run so that you may obtain, it says. Interesting word. It's a compound word. You don't need to know the Greek word, katalambano. It just means to seize something strongly. This idea of a guy who's near the finish line, and you know how he lurches forward to win. Or a guy who's been looking for something for a long time, he finally finds it and he seizes it strongly. That's kind of the idea of this word. Paul says, run so that you may seize the goal, the prize. And again, I think of Paul. He finished his race. He ran it, he competed, and he finished it. No one could accuse Paul of being lazy or of getting off track. He obtained, just like he encouraged the rest of us to do also. And think of the things he suffered throughout his life. And he was one of God's choicest men. Look at the things he suffered, hardship, shipwrecks, cold, starvation, hunger, threats from criminals, how many times he was beaten in life and near, to an inch of his life, and on and on. And yet he finished his race. Likewise, if we want to finish this fathering race, if you want to call it that God has graciously given us, it will take all of your courage, all of your moral backbone, all of your determination, all of your love to finish it well. To sit on a couch and hope it just all turns out well won't cut it at all. You need to make that decision that you will, in this fathering race, since your job is never done, that you will run this race and that you'll go the distance, that you'll trust the Lord and be the kind of parent your kids deserve and need. Well, let me wrap up by this. I came across this prayer written by us. A prayer by a father for his son is written by General Douglas MacArthur. He wrote this, I think it was shortly after World War II, and his son, his only son, was stationed with his mother in Australia. And General Douglas MacArthur writes this. He says, build me a son, O Lord, who will be strong enough to know when he is weak, and brave enough to face himself when he is afraid, one who will be proud and unbending in honest defeat, and humble and gentle in victory. Build me a son whose wishes will not take the place of deeds, a son who will know you, and that to know himself is the foundation stone of knowledge. Lead him, I pray, not in the path of ease and comfort, but under the stress and spur of difficulties and challenge. Here let him learn to stand up in the storm. Here let him learn compassion for those who fail. Build me a son whose heart will be clear, whose goal will be high, a son who will master himself before he seeks to master other men, one who will reach into the future, yet never forgets the past. And after all these things are his, add, I pray, enough of a sense of humor, so that he may always be serious, yet never take himself too seriously. Give him humility, so that he may always remember the simplicity of greatness, the open mind of true wisdom, and the weakness of real strength. Then I, his father, will dare to whisper, I have not lived in vain. Well, let's pray. Lord, parenting is a huge challenge. And I thank you that you set the example for us. And as we follow you, you're able to